Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, shocking everyone I'm sure, the Wheel of Jobs decided that we play Summoner on a Monday evening, about a week before 7.2 drops. I'm actually surprised the wheel allowed me to spin it with only one thing on it. Now, this set was pretty calm, with just a bunch of solid duties, and for once, no extremes. That said, for duty 1, we went as an instant replacement in World of Darkness. On the first boss, we have some chaos break out because both our tank and a few other players, including another tank, dies to doom. Remember, to get rid of it, step on the glowy platforms. This spirals even more out of control because it looks like only my team's tank had tank stance on initially, and they're very likely a first timer. Eventually, things go back in order when our tank picks up the boss again, although we kill the boss 1 second before at least half of my team would have died from doom again. Later, on the Scylla clone fight, our tank randomly used tank limit break, but I caught on to it so late that I didn't even bother to comment on it. I was just so surprised. Despite all the chaos, our tank is also allowed to main tank the Hydra boss. Nearing the end of that fight though, it seems the Paladin from Alliance A had enough of the chaos and decided to spring into action, immediately moving the Hydra where it is normally tanked, and also taking over main tanking for the remaining bosses. Something strange happened on Cloud of Darkness though. As I recall, she usually opens the fight with a chasing AoE on a random player and then teleports away to do a surprise line AoE. And shortly after that, she starts pulling in clouds. In this team, it seems like she skipped straight to the clouds. Given this skip, we don't manage to skip the hypercharged clouds intermission, but we still go through pretty fast. For duty 2, we went to Alexandria, and something that often comes up early in this duty is the elephant. Due to the pacing of the starting parts of the duty, it is very likely your 2-minute cooldowns will be ready again during the fight with the elephant, but most of the time, they will come up late enough that using them will almost certainly waste part of them, but too early that not using them will really make the fight drag out. Turns out, with a 7.1 Pictomancer and a Summoner as your DPS, when both of them hold for the boss, the elephant takes a while. Aside from this particular outlier, I feel like I managed to keep up the attack without delaying cooldowns much throughout the duty. There are a few things you can do generally to maximize your damage in a dungeon as Summoner, considering things like movement and varying pack sizes and pulls, as well as stops and starts. The first tip I have here is that if you know a fight is ending soon, it may be better to prioritize Ifrit to get those slow casts out of the way, as they will be very awkward while the tank is rounding up mobs in a bit. Add to this, while rounding up mobs, the Ifrit melee combo is kinda nice, and optimally, you should aim to get Garuda's slipstream down once the tank stops moving, meaning getting Ifrit out of the way and saving Garuda for last, may be beneficial for AoE pulls. The second tip is in regards to dealing with downtime. Summoner's rotation is rather cramped, and you only have one Ruin 3 cast in an approximately 1-minute loop. This means that if more time than one GZD passes, you should optimally skip other things. The most important thing to try and fit are all of the primal summons, as they do a lot of damage. For Garuda, getting Slipstream out is a good idea. For Ifrit, the melee combo is pretty good. And for Titan, well, as many rights as you can would be good. So when rushing through your primals, use Slipstream followed by maybe one Emerald Rite for Garuda. Use the melee combo for Ifrit, and then get to Titan and use as many rights and busters as you can before summoning Bahamut or Phoinix again, which should be summoned on cooldown as best you can, most of the time. The idea is that it takes around 7.5 seconds or so per summon, so how fast you have to flip through them depends on what the cooldown is on your big summon. The last tip I have is if your summoner gear set does not have any spell speed innately on it and you rely on spell speed materia to hit the GZD you desire to fit 6 impulses per Bahamut, then it is a very good idea to bring at least one piece of equipment with spell speed on it in case you sink down. Anyway, this run went well, which is of course why we're talking about, like, general stuff. For duty 3, we went to Yuweyawata Field Station. Quite an interesting detail about the first boss here is that if your team pumps hard enough on damage, it is possible to skip the intermission with the crystals, or rather, skip the final raid wipe that concludes it. Letting the crystals explode naturally applies a magic vuln debuff, but as far as I know from my solo run as warrior, this does not make the final raid wipe lethal, so I wonder if it is possible to entirely ignore the crystals and just rush down the boss. The final boss has a lot of small nuances to it that can play into the summoner's rotation. If you just mindlessly run through the rotation of Titan first, then Garuda, then Ifrit, you may run into problems depending on how the mechanics play. As such, paying attention and planning accordingly is a good idea. For instance, using the Ifrit melee combo during the section with the spiraling out circle AoEs is nice. Similarly, making sure you don't have such a melee combo queued up in a second when the boss is about to delete the middle is also smart. In a similar fashion, as the boss moves around a lot on its own, planning your slipstreams so the boss doesn't just leave them can be helpful. And finally, due to how the boss seems to swap between mechanics that require you to move a lot and then not move very much, sequences of Titan into Bahamut into Titan again can be quite beneficial to keep up the attack. Also, remember, the boss starts the fight with a half-room cleave, so don't hunker down too far away right then. For duty 4, we went to Wait Up! And our team did so much damage that we managed to clear out the not invulnerable ads so fast that they managed to respawn and take a bunch of damage again before the invulnerability actually ended. I mean, optimally, you could hit all the non-invulnerable ones to near death and then just wait for the last one. When it can take damage, hit it low and then cleave all of them. But imagine coordinating that with randoms, am I right? For duty 5, we land in A10N, Breath of the Creator. This was thanks to Chichi, Nox, sniping me into this duty. Hello. I believe this was their third attempt at sniping me into a duty of their choice in this particular session. Now, a general tip for this boss is when the platform thingies are glowing, don't touch them. They are genuinely traps, so stepping on them causes a mechanic to happen. The only real advantage to forcibly activating a specific trap is that the one closest to the entrance to the arena, versus away of where you're fighting the boss typically, is particularly brutal, doing damage and preventing movement for several seconds. And this one is unavoidable, by the way. As only one trap can be activated at a time, you can force one of the quote-unquote milder traps to avoid the worst one. But genuinely, this is only necessary if there is someone in your party deliberately trying to spam traps in the first place. So this is more like a countermeasure. In case you do have such a player in the group, the best you can do is try to figure out a consistent safe spot to dodge the particular trap they have decided on. At least you can see it coming, right? Despite the crazy traps, we managed to push through quite easily. For duty 6, we have Under Pressure! Now, not that much to say here. Make sure to swift cast the last Ether Charge Ruin for maximum damage, I suppose. Also, remember that the Rubikabi takes a while to land their damage, so it is unlikely it is actually faster to use it over just casting Ruin again as the fight wraps up. For duty 7, we went to Your Poison Running Through My Veins, a probably easy guild test, although I don't even have AoE here, so I end up just hard focusing the boss. But it turns out the tank forgot to activate tank stance, as it comes online shortly after I mention it. But this actually did lead us to almost having a death. For duty 8, we went to Praetorium. After all, this was still during the Mogtome event, so it is mildly shocking this didn't come up more often. A funny little detail I like to point out in this duty is how, in the cutscenes with no voice acting, the music still quiets down when they start speaking in text, even though there is not really any need to. Unless, I suppose, the music is distracting while you try to read. Another random thing I never noticed before is that the sound of Outburst hitting multiple targets is the same sound as Art of War hitting multiple targets. Now that I heard it, it is hard to ignore. Now, regarding the actual duty itself, considering how many of the obstacles in the Magitech armor section take exactly 3 hits to die, having 3 players in perfect sync with the cannons really speeds up that section. Not that it was that slow to begin with. One final tip before we move on is the fact that in this level range, summoners actually see a reasonable DPS gain from being in melee range and actively auto-attacking while casting their spells, just like scholars. For duty 9, we went to M1N, Black Cat, and we had 2 summoners, so after the opener, I decided to skip my Searing Light over to the odd minute, meaning at 3, 5, 7 minute smaller bursts. Due to moving Searing Flash away, it is a smaller loss for me, but the gain for everyone else probably makes it worth it. A key on this fight is that at some point, you will probably get smacked up into the air. In fact, it is perfectly possible you will have your rotation interrupted by this, if she targets you during the Ifrit section for instance. So it is worth keeping in mind to skip the correct parts of your rotation, just like we talked about in Alexandria, in case you lose too much time on it. The best thing you can possibly line up with getting smacked is a swift-casted Slipstream, or failing that, a swift-casted Rubyrite, as these spells have the longest GZDs in your toolkit, meaning you spent the most time in the air, passing time you would have done nothing in anyway. One final tip for this boss is that when she breaks the floor, it appears to be consistently the case, based on my many runs here, that she always leaves 2 center platforms safe. But do keep a close eye on which ones she keeps around. For duty 10, we went to P3N, Phoinix, and turns out Saturn knew me. Hello! Overall, a relatively simple fight. The key things that can really screw you over in this one is first the Ring of Fire and the giant fireball indicators. If experimental fire plume leads into a circle of fireballs, then the mechanic will be spiraling AoEs in the outer edge of the arena, finishing with a big explosion in the middle. If instead the fire plume leads into a big fireball, the center will be hit by a large circle AoE. Usually, the boss will perform one, then the other. Another part that can be confusing is the Darkened Fire into Brightened Fire sequence. The Darkened Fire needs to be hit by a Brightened Fire circle. The size of these white AoEs are big enough that one player can cover 2 if needed, but as long as every Darkened Fire is hit, you're fine. The last problematic mechanic is the intermission with the Sunbirds. They have large, clearly indicated green circles. These circles are the distances they need to be from other Sunbirds to not cause a disaster. Optimally, you have a Sunbird die at the edge of the arena in each cardinal direction, so make sure they are properly spaced. However, if some of them overlap anyway, it doesn't necessarily mean you wipe immediately. As you can see in this run, 2 of them overlapping led to the boss getting an additional pump of plus 30 extra gauge, but as it didn't hit 100, it just hurts more as the boss also received 2 damage buffs. After this fake near-death experience, we round up the fight. Remember, when the cinders come down, go behind the first one that spawns and then follow them around in the order they came down. And finally for duty 11, we went to Vanguard. As this is a duty where we get Phoinix every other minute, I think it is a good time to bring up the fact that Rekindle, the healing astral flow, can be used on other players. So if you don't need it, and no one else needs it, put it on the tank. Even if they don't need it, they're the most likely to find it helpful. Now, on the first boss, when it performs the enhanced mobility mechanic, a fun detail is that you can actually dodge the blade by just stepping forward. This is really inconsistent if you have any amount of latency beyond the bare minimum. And furthermore, as the boss is completely untargetable during this anyway, you don't really stand to gain anything from this, aside from, coolness points. Make sure to turn them in at the counter for a hypothetical idea of sunglasses. Overall, the duty goes really well, but on the second boss, we have a very awkward sequence of events that goes: healer dies, me using Swiftcast to Slipstream, me realizing the healer's dead, me awkwardly hard-casting Resurrection on the healer. Keep your eyes open, everyone. And maybe don't greet your Swiftcasts unless you're sure it'll be fine. Speaking of this boss, I feel it may be worth bringing up Acceleration Bomb again. This mechanic, where a die starts counting down over your head. The way that you deal with it is that when the debuff ends, or when the die would hit 0, if you're doing anything at all, you get smacked into the air and take heavy damage. Anything includes moving, auto-attacking, casting, and so on, so the best you can do is sheath your weapon and stop moving. Or alternatively, untarget the boss and stop moving. The challenge of this mechanic is making sure you can stop safely where you are while the lion AoEs rampage throughout the arena. My advice, if you want to be super sure, is to stop when it hits 2 or 1 second. A rather calm set of duties this time around. Not a single extreme to be seen, and only a few guild tests, thankfully. The Phoinix fight, where it looked like we were going to die, was also really funny. Now, with the Wheel of Jobs fully finished, this means that we can start a new wheel with all the jobs back on it, fresh for 7.2, although this will be a few weeks into 7.2 for you, of course. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, with the recent change to Necrotize with 7.2, the change being a 20 potency buff, it went from 440 to 460 potency. As Pain Flare is 150 potency, this means this buff actually means Pain Flare is better on 4 targets rather than 3, once you reach level 92, of course.